Welcome back to the ISO with myself, your host, Dan Dickau, as we tour the WCC on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network with all of the head coaches. This week's guest, one of my favorite coaches that I get to connect with throughout the college basketball season, the head coach of Pepperdine University in beautiful Malibu, California, Lorenzo Romar. Coach, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Well, this question comes up every time you and I text or talk during the season or off season. How's the weather there? Because Spokane's been gloomy this spring.
Yeah, it's today it's supposed to be 90 degrees and it's clear. Yeah. So it's good.
I'm jealous. Good. So how does that positively impact recruiting for you to get guys? Because I remember when I was in high school, you were recruiting me when you were at your first stint at Pepperdine. And I didn't even want to consider Gonzaga because I was a 17-year-old kid at the time, and it was too cold and it was too snowy.
Yeah.
I wanted to either stay in my home pocket along the I-5 corridor or possibly go down to where you were at Pepperdine. How do you use that as a factor in recruiting?
I think it generates a thirst, is what I would say. But then we've got to back it up with other things of substance. You know, that I would say the scenery is great. I mean, it's unlike no other, but, you know, maybe that's fluff when it really comes down to why you would pick a school. And maybe that if it's a tie, it's even, maybe that gives us an edge. But we've never lost anyone because of the scenery in terms of recruiting. But I still think, you know, we're working to have other things other than just the scenery, but it doesn't hurt at all.
Yeah, walking out of Firestone Fieldhouse on that west entrance, looking out over the Pacific Ocean is one of my favorite exits when I'm done with a college basketball broadcast, because it's unbelievable.
Right.
How refreshing is that view out of your office every single morning? Because that, I'm sure, just brings you energy and life to attack your day.
It does. Even more so the drive in, because as you pull into campus, you look to your left and there's the ocean right there. You know, it's not a lake, it's not a river, it's an ocean. So it's always, this isn't bad, you know, so it's no complaints there.
Well, you're heading into season 5 at Pepperdine. The WCC continues to improve. Unfortunately for you guys, you had a number of injuries last year, but you've got a really talented roster. Maxwell Lewis, Houston Millette, Mike Mitchell Jr. will be returning. But after each season, coaches take a step back and kind of process how the season went, where you need to improve upon. What was that like for you this spring, and what were the focal points that you're trying to address with your program this off season?
Well, there's no doubt we did a deep dive, like we always do, into a program and what we need to do to get better in it. There's no question we've got to get better defensively. We've got to become a better rebounding team, and we've got to do a better job of taking care of the basketball and taking better shots, those type of things. Some things we'll get better at just because we'll be a little more experienced. It's not like we have a team of 6 or 7 seniors. We're still young, but we're an old young. And what I mean by that is we had a number of guys that were young that were able to get quality minutes out there on the basketball floor. And I think that's going to help in terms of their level of confidence coming in.
Those 3 young players, the freshmen that I talked about, when you break down a season for them individually as a staff and then approach them with it, how do you go about doing that? Because there are 3 young guys that I'm sure you saw a lot of positives with, and you saw a lot of opportunities to coach growth into them on. How do you as a coach go about really breaking it down individually for guys who are talented like that?
Well, fortunately for us and fortunately for them, those guys are obsessed with being the best that they can be. Those guys aren't real excuse makers. They're trying to be the best. They're saying, give me more, give me more. You know, how can I get better? You know, they watch film, they watch college games, they record college games, record NBA games, they watch them over and over. They watch certain players and their tendencies, players that they feel that they're similar to in terms of their style of play, and watch and try to learn from those guys. So we we try to take advantage of that. And, we have many conversations, as they watch film, they come back, we can give them, they give us feedback, we give them feedback, continue to tell them how they fit in, what we need them to do for us. And I think they'll be better this year.
When you talk about the NBA game, you've coached a number of pros who were kind of surefire pros when they got to you at the University of Washington. And then you've developed a number of pros, both Kessler Edwards is the most recent one at Pepperdine, as well as developed in a number of guys at the University of Washington. Is there a guy that you like to truly use as a kind of a blueprint for guys that you're either recruiting to look at, or guys like the three that we've been talking about on your current roster, of how much preparation they need to do, film work, strength training, on court development? Who's the blueprint?
Well, a couple of guys that really stand out are from my time at University of Washington, were Nate Robinson and Isaiah Thomas, because those guys were relentless. Will Conroy, who is an assistant now at the University of Washington, played a little bit in the NBA, but was also just a gym rat. And those guys were very, very similar. They just worked and watched film and tried to develop. And they did. Justin Holiday was one that was underappreciated, undervalued, I believe. And he's been in the NBA for, I believe, 9 years now, and he really developed. I think he was a 6'6", 160-pound wing when he came out of high school, and just got better. But there's another kid that, when you talk about the NBA, he's not there yet. But Colby Ross, who played for us, is the all-time leading scorer and assist leader in the history of the Pepperdine program. And he's one of the best I've seen in terms of his work ethic and being obsessed and trying to learn. And they're just, when guys are like that, they become legendary in terms of how they got to be where they are. Some people are legendary based on what they did out there on the floor, but Kobe's legendary a couple of ways: in what he accomplished, what he produced, but also how he got there. And his name is one that, is around our program, even though he's not here anymore. And our guys all respected him, and he's someone you can always point to.
You talk about Colby Ross kind of progressing and sticking with it, and you think he'll make an NBA roster. I look at his potential path being very similar to a player from Gonzaga a few years back in Kevin Pangos, and his continuous drive to excel and belief in himself. And Kevin was in the NBA for a short bit last year before deciding to sign another European contract. Mm-hmm. But, a guy like Kevin Pangos looked to guys like myself who were there before for guidance. Colby Ross can be that influence at Pepperdine. You had a great group of guys at University of Washington that kind of pulled each other in the right direction. How do you build that camaraderie amongst a player group that kind of spans different eras of a program?
You know what? Any coach that just says, you come play for me, I'm going to develop you to where you're going to be this type of player. If you don't have the makeup to do that, that coach isn't going to do that. What I think it comes down to is doing a good job of evaluating and recruiting those that are obsessed, as they say, obsessed with the process, those that have a passion for this basketball game, a passion to be the best. I think it really helps when you really look for that in your student athletes, because when they come in, they have that passion. They're going to respond to whatever you give them, whatever instruction you give them, but they're not going to stop there. They're not going to be what I call 9-to-5 guys. When we talk to guys about the classroom, if you just go to class every day and don't do much work outside the classroom, you're not going to get as good a grade. The ones that get the really good grades spend extra time. And I think it's definitely like that as an athlete. You spend that extra time, you're doing all that you can to be the best that you can be, you're going to get better and you're going to reach your potential. And those that are even, kids talk about rankings, people talk about rankings. You get someone that's between the top 40 and top 55, somewhere in there. The ones with the passion, are going to pass those others up that don't have the passion. Those guys will end up being some of the top players. And you find sometimes those guys end up being lottery picks where people hadn't even heard of.
That I completely agree with that. Passion will kind of continue to drive you forward, and that work ethic will allow you to overcome guys who are, quote, ranked higher. During the recruiting process, as you're evaluating players, talking to AAU coaches, their high school coaches, what are the type of questions, or what are you really looking for that kind of separate those guys that you're just kind of alluding to?
Coach, how much does he like to play? Oh, he loves to play. You know, coaches will say that they try not to, a lot of them won't try to throw their guys under the bus. But okay, so when you say really likes to play, what does that mean? Because, Dan, you know, some guys will come into the gym and nowadays with their shoes untied, they do a couple of drills and put it on Instagram, daily grind. You know, look at me, I'm grinding. And it's, a lot of times it's not really grinding. And so is he a self-starter? We had a guy play for us one time. He would work out all the time, but he had to have someone work him out. He had to have someone take him to the gym. If no one called him to work out, he wouldn't work out. Are they self-starters?
Yeah.
You know, are they going to go in there? Are they going to try to find the custodian at the school to make sure they can get in the gym? Coach, can someone meet me? Can I get in this gym? Can I have access to the gym? And they're going in there and working on relevant skills, not some and one mixtape stuff, you know, that they can put on Instagram. I'm talking about things that are going to help you, help your team win games. Are they constantly doing that? Are they a student of the game? You know, I think things like that are very, very important. Are they early to practice? Do they leave later after everyone else? You just try to ask those questions and you come across, usually you can put together a pretty good profile, but then those conversations with the kids themselves, they tell on themselves one way or the other. And
well, I remember when you were recruiting me in high school, we would have conversations on the phone and you would ask those same questions.
you remember?
You would ask, hey, you
and
had
you were
open
like
gym
that, Dan. You were one of those guys. You were obsessed with the process.
I had to be. You know,
Yeah.
I was smaller. I was from an under-recruited area because of population. And so I had to be. But I remember conversations that we would have after open gym with my high school team. How did your team do that night? Did you win all the games? And kind of I sheepishly had to answer whether or not we had a good night of wins and losses or a bad night. So it's awesome to see those questions, and that thought process hasn't changed all these years.
I'm gonna tell you a story. I have time to tell you a story.
Of course.
When in recruiting, you talk to certain kids, and it's always interesting. You talk to someone after their game. How'd the game go? Oh, we lost, coach. And we need a new coach. How'd you guys lose? They wouldn't give me the ball. It's never their fault. We coached a kid who you know named John Brockman. It was at the University of Washington. And John was a stud, McDonald's All-American, All-Conference, led the Pac-12 in rebounding 3 consecutive years. And called him after his game one night. What happened? Coach, we lost. Really? Oh, man. How many did you lose by? How'd you lose? I missed 4 free throws in the last 2 minutes of the game. So it was on me. So try to cheer him up. Well, how many points you scored, John? You know, Coach, I don't know. Well, I know he could rebound. How many rebounds you get? Coach, I don't know. So I realized he didn't want to talk. He was down. And so I said, well, look, we'll talk later. Sorry about the loss. The next day, back then, you know, the internet wasn't clicking as much. So I get the newspaper and read the headlines. It says his high school, Snohomish High School, drops a thriller in spite of John Brockman's 41 points and 21 rebounds. But he put it all on him. His team wouldn't have been in the game if it wasn't for that. Those things are valuable to hear. It's a red flag when you talk to a person or anyone that it's never their fault. That's a red flag because they're going to bring that to your program. But when someone is as humble as that and they're placing the blame on themselves And it wasn't false humility either. It was, I could have helped our team win that game by making those free throws. There are a number of conversations that you have, Dan, where things like that come out with kids. You're able to figure them out.
That's unbelievable. That's a great story. I'm going to have to try to remember that one to be able to share at different points, because 41 points, 21 rebounds, unfortunately missed a couple free throws that may have altered the outcome of the game. And he doesn't want to kind of talk about the positives he provided, but he wanted to kind of focus on the loss. That's amazing. And those are the kind of kids I would imagine you want to work with every single day and know that they're going to give their all to make your team the best. Am I correct?
Oh, there's no doubt. And I've been a head coach going into 26 years, Dan, and I knew this before, but I don't think I really, really valued it as much as I needed to. And I think that's something we will try not to take someone unless, I mean, their talent is they're so off the charts that they're still better than everyone, but it's still going to catch up with you. I think it's contagious when you have a group of kids like that have great character and are obsessed with the game. I think that's when you have great culture, when you can have a team full of kids like that. So we really put a high premium on trying to look for those guys.
Well, NIL has been around now for about a year. Name, image, likeness. I've always felt that college student athletes, in particular, the revenue generating sports like football, basketball, should be paid. But I also said it was going to take about 3 years to kind of flush out how exactly this is going to work. What are you seeing on the NIL? And I don't need you to get into any true negatives, but is this working the way that people thought it was going to work? And is there opportunities that Pepperdine can take advantage of?
Well, first of all, I think it's great. I think, back in the day when you would go into a home and recruit someone, the question would come up, Coach, are you able to get me a summer job so I can make extra money? This has replaced, to me, the summer job back in the day. And everyone did it. All the schools tried to provide summer jobs for kids. And now with the NIL, I think it's a great opportunity for them. I've always had one question about it before it was implemented, was just how do you monitor it? And that's my biggest concern, is to be able to monitor it. I think that when there are gray areas in terms of the NCAA rules, the one thing that sometimes without looking at the rule book, you can just make your own decision with it, is that is this going to be an unfair recruiting advantage? And if it is, then you should do it. And I think in some ways it's out there that way. But I also feel like it's here. It's here. It's great for the kids, and we have to figure out a way to navigate through it. But I do think there needs to be some modifications and some regulations put in place for it to be a lot better for everyone.
Well, there's definitely some teams across college basketball and football that are taking advantage and figuring things out. Hopefully it becomes a benefit for your program as well. But when you look at the WCC, I saw a league last year that had tremendous growth over the last couple of years, and it kind of came to fruition last year. 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. There were 2 that were on the borderline, BYU and Santa Clara, based on how their quadrant 1 and 2 wins went, their improvement, but unfortunately injuries hurt both teams. When you look at the transfer portal and the influx of new talent, as well as some new coaches like Steve Lavin at USD, I see this league continuing to get better. What do you see?
The same thing. And as the league gets better, it's become more attractive to potential student athletes. And so I think it'll continue to grow. I think people see the WCC now as a viable option, somewhere where you can go and be successful and play in a strong conference and play in the NCAA tournament, and a number of teams will be able to go. And you're right. I know Santa Clara, if it weren't for their injuries, there's no doubt to me they're in the NCAA tournament last year. But the league is definitely strong. There's no doubt.
So for Pepperdine to make that jump and be in that top tier and be in the conversation to be an NCAA tournament team, you've got young pieces and talent. What do you guys need to do?
Well, some of the things we talked about at the outset, we have to become better defending, got to become better rebounding, better taking care of the basketball, those things. But two things. Number one, because it's bitten us the last few years, is we have to stay healthy. It makes such a difference. And then number two, how quickly can we grow up this year? The faster we can grow up, the quicker we'll become, I think, a much better team. But we've got to grow up.
Awesome. Well, great stuff, Coach. I do have one last question for you. You played in the NBA. I know you're a basketball junkie. The NBA Finals is currently going on. When this releases, there'll be one more game that's played. But as it stands right now, when we're recording this, the series is tied 1-1. Who do you have, Boston or Golden State?
I think at the end of the day, Golden State will persevere, but they better not make a mistake, because Boston, they're young, the exception of Mr. Horford. They're young, they're confident, they're tough. They have multiple defenders, they have multiple guys that can put the ball in the basket, and Golden State better not have a hiccup, because Boston could get it. But at the end of the day, you pin me down, I'd have to take Golden State. I just think they have enough guys that have been there, done that, to be able to get it done.
It's hard to bet against Steph Curry, that's for sure. But I've got Boston. That coaching staff, Ime Udoka was a teammate and a friend of mine from growing up. And then Aaron Miles, Ben Sullivan, who played at University of Portland, and Damon Stoudemire.
Right.
So I got to pull for my Portland connections.
Yeah, and those are great guys. And I don't think Ime and the staff get enough credit for the coaching job that they've done this year. They've done a phenomenal coaching job. You look at some of their defensive schemes in the games, the way they defend, the way they had to get over the hump during the middle of the year when there's seemed like a little dissension there. They got through those things, and you got to give that staff, Ime and the staff, a whole lot of credit.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, thanks again for joining. Enjoy the Southern California weather, and I look forward to talking again as we get closer to the season.